The signature dried within seconds, black ink binding Vivian Hayes to a future she never imagined. Across the mahogany desk, Nathaniel Cross sat perfectly still, his expression revealing nothing as he countersigned the contract. The lawyer to his left collected the documents with practiced efficiency. And just like that, Vivian became a wife. Not in any way that mattered to her heart. This was business. Pure, clinical, transactional business. Nathaniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the precision of someone who controlled every detail of his world. He was tall, imposing, with dark hair, silvered slightly at the temples, and eyes that reminded Vivian of winter mornings. Cold, beautiful, unforgiving. Your father's company will receive the full investment by morning, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The merger will be announced next week. You will move into the penthouse by Friday. Vivian nodded, her throat tight. Her father's architectural firm, Hayes and Associates, had been circling bankruptcy for months. Medical bills from his illness had drained everything. Nathaniel's offer had arrived like a lifeline wrapped in chains. 1 year, as his wife, in exchange for saving everything her father built, she had accepted because she had no choice. Or at least, that was what she told herself. The rules of their arrangement had been laid out clearly during their previous meeting. No emotional involvement. Separate bedrooms, public appearances at his discretion to maintain the image of a stable marriage for his investors. She would attend charity events, smile for cameras, and speak when spoken to. In return, she would have access to his resources and the security of knowing her father's legacy was safe. It sounded simple on paper. Living it was something else entirely. Friday arrived too quickly. Vivian stood in the elevator of Nathaniel's building, watching the numbers climb higher and higher until they reached the penthouse level. The doors opened onto a private foyer with marble floors so polished she could see her reflection. A housekeeper named Helen greeted her with a professional smile and showed her to her room. It was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was elegant and expensive, and everything was perfectly arranged. It felt like a hotel suite. Sterile, impersonal, not hers. Nathaniel was in his study when she finished unpacking. Helen informed her that he worked late most evenings and preferred not to be disturbed. Vivian ate dinner alone that first night, sitting at a table designed for 12. The silence broken only by the soft clink of silverware against china. This became her routine. Nathaniel left before she woke and returned after she had retreated to her room. They existed in the same space but lived entirely separate lives. On the rare occasions they crossed paths, he was polite but distant, treating her with the same courtesy he might extend to a business associate. The first public event came 3 weeks into their arrangement. A charity gala for pediatric research, hosted at a historic hotel downtown. Helen helped her choose a gown, a deep emerald dress that fit perfectly but felt like a costume. When Nathaniel saw her, he gave a single nod of approval. "You look appropriate," he said. "Not beautiful. Not stunning. Appropriate." At the gala, Vivian learned what her role truly meant. She stood slightly behind Nathaniel as he networked with investors and board members. When someone addressed her, she smiled and offered pleasantries. But Nathaniel always redirected the conversation back to business. When a photographer asked them to pose together, Nathaniel placed his hand on the small of her back for exactly 3 seconds. Long enough for the picture, then immediately stepped away. She felt invisible. Worse than invisible, she felt like a prop in someone else's story. The drive home was silent. Vivian stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. She thought about her father, recovering slowly but steadily now that he had proper care. She thought about the contracts she had signed, the promises she had made. She thought about the 11 months and 1 week she had left to endure. When they arrived at the penthouse, Nathaniel went straight to his study without a word. Vivian stood in the foyer for a long moment, still wearing the emerald gown, feeling the weight of her decision settle over her like a shroud. The next morning, she woke to find an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a credit card with her name on it, and a note in Nathaniel's precise handwriting. "For personal expenses, use it as needed. There are no limits. Money. He thought money was what she needed. Vivian tucked the card into her wallet and made herself coffee. As she sat by the window, looking out at the city waking below, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Hey Viv. I am back in town. Would love to catch up if you have time. Owen. Owen Fletcher. Her best friend from architecture school. The person who knew her before she became Mrs. Nathaniel Cross. Before she learned to make herself small and quiet and appropriate. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed her response. Coffee, tomorrow. His reply came instantly. Absolutely. I will send you the address. For the first time in weeks, something inside Vivian sparked to life. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The reminder that there was a world beyond these walls. A version of herself that still remembered how to smile without permission. She did not know it yet. But that single message would change everything. Nathaniel emerged from his study, an hour later, dressed for the office. He glanced at Vivian briefly. I have meetings through the evening. Do not wait for dinner. She nodded, watching him leave. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and once again, she was alone in the beautiful prison she had agreed to call home. But tomorrow, she would meet Owen. Tomorrow, she would remember what it felt like to be seen. The coffee shop Owen chose was small and tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. The kind of place Nathaniel would never notice. Vivian arrived early, choosing a table by the window where she could watch people pass by. Real people living ordinary lives, not performing for cameras or maintaining appearances. When Owen walked in, his face broke into the kind of genuine smile she had almost forgotten existed. He had always been like that, warm and open, wearing his heart where everyone could see it. He looked the same, maybe a bit older. His blonde hair slightly longer than she remembered. Vivian Hayes, he said, pulling her into a hug that lasted just long enough to remind her what real affection felt like. You look different. She pulled back, settling into her chair. Different how? He studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful, polished. Like you stepped out of a magazine. But your eyes look tired. The observation cut deeper than she expected. She had spent weeks perfecting the mask, and Owen had seen through it in seconds. They talked for 2 hours. Owen had been working in Europe, designing sustainable housing projects. He spoke with the same passion he always had, his hands moving expressively as he described the communities he had helped build. Vivian found herself leaning forward, drawn into his stories. Remembering the version of herself who used to dream about creating spaces that mattered. What about you? Owen asked finally. I saw the announcement about your marriage. Pretty sudden. Vivian stirred her coffee, searching for words that were honest, but not too revealing. It was practical. My father needed help. Nathaniel needed stability for his investors. Owen's expression shifted, concern clouding his features. That sounds like a business deal. Not a marriage. It is both, she said quietly. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The gesture was simple, friendly, but Vivian felt the warmth of it radiate through her. When was the last time someone had touched her without calculating the optics first? You deserve more than practical, Viv. You deserve someone who sees you. The words settled into the hollow space in her chest. She pulled her hand back gently. Not wanting to blur lines, but grateful for the reminder that kindness still existed. They parted with promises to meet again. As Vivian walked back to the penthouse, something had shifted inside her. The city looked different. She looked different. For the first time since signing the contract, she felt like a person instead of a placeholder. Nathaniel was home when she arrived. Standing by the windows with a glass of scotch, he turned when she entered, his gaze sweeping over her casual clothes, her loose hair, the lightness in her expression. You were out, he said. Not a question, but not quite a statement either. I had coffee with a friend. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. Which friend? Owen Fletcher. We went to school together. Nathaniel took a slow sip of his drink. I was not informed of your plans. Vivian felt a spark of defiance. I did not realize I needed to report my schedule. The silence stretched between them, tension building in the space. Nathaniel set down his glass with careful precision. This arrangement works. Because of structure, boundaries. Understanding. Understanding goes both ways, Vivian replied, her voice steady. You leave every day without telling me where you are going. I do not question it. That is different. How? He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since she had known him, Nathaniel Cross did not have an immediate answer. Vivian walked past him toward her room. Good night, Nathaniel. She did not see the way he stared after her, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. The days that followed established a new pattern. Vivian began leaving the penthouse more often. She visited art galleries, spent afternoons in parks, sketching building designs, met Owen for lunch twice more. She started taking online courses in sustainable architecture, filling her mind with something other than the endless silence of her gilded cage. Nathaniel noticed. How could he not? She was no longer waiting in the wings, no longer arranging her schedule around his unspoken expectations. At business dinners, she engaged in conversations about urban planning and environmental design, her passion breaking through the polished veneer. People responded to her, drawn to the intelligence and warmth she had been hiding. It unsettled him in ways he could not articulate. One evening, Vivian's sister Grace arrived unannounced. Grace was everything Vivian was not: bold, outspoken, unapologetically herself. She took one look around the penthouse and her expression hardened. "This is where you are living?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "It is beautiful," Vivian said automatically. "It is a museum." Grace walked through the rooms, taking in the expensive furniture. The perfect arrangements, the complete absence of anything personal. "Where are your things, Viv? Your sketches? Your plants? Anything that makes this yours?" "It came furnished." "That is not what I asked." Grace found her in the kitchen, pouring tea with mechanical precision. She caught Vivian's wrist gently, forcing her sister to meet her eyes. "Who are you becoming in this place?" The question broke something loose. Vivian's carefully maintained composure cracked, and tears she had been holding back for months finally spilled over. "I do not know anymore," she whispered. Grace pulled her into a fierce hug. "Then it is time to remember." That night, after Grace left, Vivian sat in her room, staring at the contract she had pulled from her desk drawer. 12 months had been the agreement. She had served for 8 remained. But what would be left of her after 8 more months of disappearing? She made her decision in the quiet hours before dawn. When Nathaniel emerged from his room, dressed for another day of meetings, she was waiting in the living room. The contract sat on the coffee table between them. "We need to talk," she said. Nathaniel glanced at the contract, then at her face. His expression shifted, guards rising immediately. "About what?" "About ending this, early." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nathaniel remained perfectly still, but she saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. "We have an agreement. Agreements can be renegotiated. I will find another way to pay you back. I will work, I will take loans, whatever it takes, but I cannot do this anymore." "Cannot or will not?" "Both," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I am disappearing, Nathaniel. Piece by piece. I wake up and do not recognize the person in the mirror. I had coffee with an old friend and remembered what it feels like to laugh. That should not be extraordinary. But in this life, it is. Nathaniel moved then, crossing to the windows, putting space between them. "This is about him." "This Owen. This is about me," Vivian corrected. "About remembering, I am a person, not a photograph or a signature on a contract." He turned back, and for just a moment, she saw something raw in his expression. Vulnerability, quickly buried beneath layers of control. "I have given you everything you needed. Everything except permission to exist," she replied softly. The words struck him visibly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The woman standing before him was not the quiet, compliant wife he had expected. She was someone fighting her way back to herself. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice rough. "I want to feel alive again. I want to create things that matter. I want conversations that go deeper than weather and stock prices. I want someone to care when I leave the room." She paused, gathering courage. "I want what we agreed this would never be. And that means I need to leave." Nathaniel's control finally cracked. "You cannot just walk away. Watch me." She picked up the contract and walked toward her room, leaving him standing alone in the space that had never quite been a home. That night, Vivian began packing. Not everything, just enough. Enough to prove to herself this was real. Grace's apartment was smaller than a single room in Nathaniel's penthouse, but it felt like sanctuary. Vivian slept on the couch for the first 3 nights, but it was the best sleep she had gotten in months. She woke to the smell of coffee and her sister's terrible singing, to sunlight that felt warm instead of clinical, to the simple comfort of being somewhere she did not have to perform. The legalities took 2 weeks to sort out. Nathaniel's lawyers were efficient, drawing up documents that released her from the marriage contract in exchange for a structured repayment plan. It would take her years to pay back what he had invested in her father's company. But Grace helped her develop a realistic budget. Vivian felt the weight of debt, but not the crushing weight of losing herself. Her father was stable now, his treatment progressing well. When she told him she was ending the marriage, he held her hand and apologized for putting her in that position. She assured him it had been her choice, and now leaving was also her choice. Vivian reconnected with former colleagues from her father's firm. Word spread that she was taking on freelance projects, and slowly, work began to trickle in. Small residential designs at first, then a community center renovation that let her explore sustainable materials and inclusive spaces. The passion she thought she had buried came rushing back. Owen became a constant presence in her life again. Though they both understood the boundaries, he was her friend, her reminder of who she had been before Nathaniel, but not a replacement for the journey she needed to take alone. 6 weeks after leaving, Vivian attended an architecture conference downtown. She wore clothes she had chosen herself, her hair pulled back in a simple style. No diamonds or designer labels. She felt more beautiful than she had at any of Nathaniel's galas. She was studying an exhibition on urban green spaces when she felt eyes on her. She turned and found Nathaniel standing 20 feet away, watching her with an expression she could not decipher. Her heart stuttered, but she did not look away. He approached slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might startle her. "Vivian," he said, her name sounding different in his mouth. Softer somehow, "Nathaniel." They stood in awkward silence, the noise of the conference fading around them. "I did not know you would be here," he said. "I am working again. This is part of my field." He nodded, glancing at the exhibition she had been studying. "You look well." "I am well," she replied honestly. "I am myself again." Something painful crossed his face. "I have been thinking about what you said, about permission to exist." Vivian waited, giving him space to continue. "I thought control was safety," he said quietly. "If I managed every variable, nothing could hurt me. Nothing could fall apart." "Did it work?" His laugh was bitter. "No. I have everything I thought I wanted, and the penthouse has never felt emptier. People moved around them, conversations flowing, but they existed in their own bubble of honesty. I destroyed something real because I was afraid of it." Nathaniel continued. "I treated you like a business transaction when you were the most genuine thing in my life." Vivian felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I needed to leave. Not to hurt you, but to save myself. I know that now." She studied his face, seeing exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, vulnerability he would never have shown before. "Good. Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "If I had been different from the start, if I had let you in, would this have been real?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities and regrets. "Maybe," she answered honestly. "But you were not different, and I cannot build a life on maybe." He absorbed this, pain clear in his expression. "What if I am different now? Then I am happy for you. Genuinely. But I spent months making myself smaller to fit into your world. I am finally remembering how to take up space again. I cannot risk shrinking myself for anyone, even a version of you that might have changed. Nathaniel nodded slowly. I understand. Vivian touched his arm briefly, a gesture of closure rather than invitation. I hope you find what you are looking for, Nathaniel. Just not at the cost of yourself. She walked away then, back toward the exhibition. Back toward the life she was building, piece by careful piece. She did not look back, though she felt his gaze following her. That evening, Owen met her for dinner. He took one look at her face and knew. You saw him, yes. And I walked away. Again. Owen raised his glass. To walking away when you need to, and to walking toward what you deserve. They clinked glasses, and Vivian felt something settle in her chest. Peace, not the kind that comes from having all the answers, but the kind that comes from knowing you are on the right path. Months passed. Vivian's career began to flourish. She won a contract to design a women's shelter, a project that combined her technical skills with her desire to create spaces of healing and safety. Her father's company stabilized, and he began talking about retirement, about passing the legacy to someone who would honor it. Nathaniel sent her a check one afternoon, returning the entire debt with a simple note. You do not owe me anything. You never did. She stared at the check for a long time, then carefully deposited it into a fund for emerging architects from underserved communities. It felt right, transforming something born from transaction into something that would help others chase their dreams. She still saw Nathaniel occasionally at industry events. They were cordial, even friendly in a distant way. She heard through professional circles that he had started attending therapy, that he had stepped back from some of his more aggressive business practices, that he was trying to build a life that meant something beyond profit. Margins, she was glad for him, genuinely. But her life was her own now. Full of projects she believed in, friendships that nourished her, and the daily practice of choosing herself. 1 year after leaving the penthouse, Vivian stood at the opening of the women's shelter she had designed. The space was filled with light, with plants, with colors chosen to promote calm and hope. Women who had survived impossible circumstances would find refuge here, would begin rebuilding their lives within walls she had helped create. Grace stood beside her, pride radiating from every inch of her being. You did this, she said. We did this, Vivian corrected. You reminded me. Owen joined them, along with her father, who had tears in his eyes as he looked at what his daughter had built. As the sun set through the large windows she had specifically positioned to catch the golden hour light, Vivian felt complete. Not because she had everything figured out, but because she had figured out the most important thing. She belonged to herself. And that was enough. Across town, Nathaniel stood alone in his penthouse, looking at a photograph from that first gala. Vivian stood slightly behind him, her expression pleasant but hollow. He had thought she looked appropriate. He had been so wrong. He set the photograph face down and turned toward the windows. The city glittered below, full of possibility and second chances. He could not undo the past. He could not reclaim what he had lost by holding too tightly to control. But he could learn. He could grow. He could spend the rest of his life becoming the kind of person who understood that love required surrender, not ownership. And maybe someday, he would find someone who would teach him what Vivian had tried to show him all along, that the most valuable things in life cannot be controlled. They can only be chosen. Again and again and again.